Okay, thank you. Hold on one second, let me see if we can get the proper screen shared here. Okay. Is everyone seeing my PowerPoint or?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, good morning. Yes, again, this is Andrea Davis, and I'm happy to be here with you this morning, just sharing a little bit about school gardens and just some things that we've learned over the last couple years. I will say that here in the Virginia Beach unit for the Master Gardener program, a few years ago, we started talking about school gardens and how to handle requests for school gardens from our school system. I was also in the midst of my master's program, and so I actually did my master's project on this, and this is kind of what I've put together and some of the resources that we have used from the Master Gardeners as well. So just to start off, a little background on school gardens for you. School gardens have been around for a very long time. And if you think about, back to the roots of our country and how things started in our nation, you know that agriculture was a huge part of things. And so back more than 150 years, we've got records of school gardens. Here are some pictures of some school gardens from the 1900s. And you can see in the picture on the left, this was no 4x8 raised bed. It was quite extensive, and you can see in the picture on the right, students were actively involved in getting outside and tending to these gardens. And then, of course, as we got into war times as well, we started to see a lot with victory gardens. And here's some of the propaganda that you would have seen during those times, talking about the school garden army. And kind of promoting children, getting involved with that, producing food that could be used at home or sent with soldiers and so forth. So a lot of cool stuff that I was able to find regarding involvement with school gardens from the 1900s. And then bounce forward, 1960s, we kind of saw a flare up with some of this again, and this came in the time of a lot of environmental awareness and promoting environmental stewardship. So we once again started to see the reemergence of some of this. And again, check out this picture on the right-hand side of the screen. It looks a little different than it did in the 1900s. We've scaled back, but again, we're seeing a need for that type of education, and it is on the cusp of a lot of this environmental awareness around the country as well. Then as we hop forward to the 2000s, again, we are seeing that push for educating children regarding growing their own food supplies. And now our focus is really on those healthy lifestyles, fresh fruits and vegetables, exposure to nature, being outside, physical activity. And a lot of this, again, we're getting a lot of feedback now from schools wanting help with these because they are seeing a need or feeling the push as well to offer this to their students. So as you can see, it's been a big part of history, and obviously there's some reason why. So these are just a few reasons why school gardening is important, why it should be incorporated if it can be. It's great for student attitudes. Student attitudes decrease when they are sitting in desks, staring at a board for 6 hours a day. And as you can imagine, you probably would feel the same way. We talk about death by PowerPoint as you're watching my PowerPoint today. But it's true, a lot of times our attitudes change when we become bored. So student attitudes typically, as have been found by research, are better if they have the opportunity to incorporate gardening. It also offers them hands-on experience Experiential learning opportunities. Again, there are some students who can take notes, listen to lectures, and very much comprehend information. There are others who are very much hands-on learners, and they need that experience to learn that concept. And in all honesty, even though there are those of us who don't need that type of education, we do benefit from it. Having that experience, putting that knowledge that you're learning in the classroom to work and actually doing what you're learning. Improved academic performance. Again, if I have a better attitude, I have better ways of learning things besides listening and writing, then typically that academic performance also increases with these students. Physical health. A lot of our elementary schools still incorporate recess. Once we get into middle and high schools, they have physical education classes, but that's pretty much it. And a lot of times those are held inside a gym and not outdoors. So as far as people's physical health, students' physical health, this has also had a positive impact because many times these students are being able to go outdoors, experience nature, be physically active and working in a garden situation. And then lastly, it helps to create global students. It gives them these big picture realizations. So a lot of times when we learn things, it applies to that classroom, you know, maybe it applies to our school, and students have a hard time of seeing how that's going to apply to life, okay? So a lot of people, you know, math class, how is this actually going to help me in life? So they want to know, they want those connections. When we start talking about school gardening and we start looking at things like food security, then we get beyond those school walls. We get more information about our communities and how that could benefit our communities. And then beyond our communities, what's going on, you know, in our region, in our state, what's going on around the world? You know, are other people learning about gardening? What are they growing? How does that benefit their life? How much is gardening involved in their life? So it really opens up some conversations about the big picture and gets us beyond the walls of the school and looking at the world and how people interact and so forth. So this is great information, and a lot of us as agents and as master gardeners, we probably know this. We think gardening's great. That's why we do what we do. But there are other people who need that information, especially if you are working with a group who maybe has never had a school garden or has been a little bit standoffish as far as school gardens go. You know, that's information you want to be able to share with them. And I'll share some resources with you later. But again, that's research-based information that I just shared with you. And I have some documents that if you would like to use them, you can, to influence some of these people we see in this list here. A lot of times getting into a school system, we need that point person that can kind of get us in the door. So a lot of times it's a teacher that we reach out to, or in some instances, if people are banging on your door, it may be the teachers that you're hearing from. That's typically who we hear from here, is the teachers. So that's kind of your in as far as the schools go. But sometimes they may need convincing to get you in the door, or once they come to you, you may need to provide them with information so they can help influence others. Specifically looking down on number 2 on this list, they're administrators. Teachers have a lot to do nowadays. Besides teaching, there's a lot of reporting that has to be done and so forth. And so a lot of times administrators need a little encouragement for some of these out-of-the-box activities that could take away or seem to take away from other things. So helping provide teachers with this information, and therefore their administrators, or maybe, again, in your situation, you're going straight to the administrators to try to get your foot in the door. Some other great folks to have involved to arm with this information as far as getting into schools or programs, after-school programs, Boys and Girls Clubs, is parents. Letting parents know how much of a benefit this could be to their child, getting them on your side. can very much help you get into some of these situations so that you can influence these students. And of course, the PTA groups, the parent-teacher groups, a lot of times in different schools may have a lot of influence. And a lot of times you can go to their meetings where you have a whole group of them in front of you, and you can gain a lot of support through presenting some of this information at some of their meetings. And then there are others in the community who need to know about this type of thing too, whether you're trying to use them as proponents of your program or whether you're trying to gain support in other ways. So looking at people like potential sponsors. The other thing we may see an issue with in schools is funding for some of these projects. So if we can find a few sponsors who might be interested in helping to purchase some of the supplies, provide some labor support, things like that, they need to know why they should be doing this. Why school gardens? Why shouldn't they be giving money, for PE equipment or something like that? So again, those are great folks to share this information with. Maybe they can contribute to buying seeds or soil. Maybe they have folks that can come and help build raised beds. And that kind of goes into the next one, which is volunteers. Again, as Master Gardeners, you all are volunteers with Virginia Cooperative Extension, but our main goal is education. And so a lot of times we are not able to do all of the labor that is required for some of these activities. So we have to look outside for other volunteers that may be willing to help. Again, a lot of times in the school systems, this tends to be parents, but there are a lot of other groups out there, especially when we talk about building things, putting things together. I know here, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts are big groups. A lot of our Boy Scouts trying to become Eagle Scouts need projects. They may be able to actually build garden beds for you. We also have a large military presence in our area. And in that case, a lot of those folks need community service. They like to do community service activities, and this is a great opportunity for them to come out and contribute to the community by helping with these as well. So this list here is just, again, the first couple you're probably very well aware of in trying to get into schools, but people that you want to get involved with the school gardening, people that you want to let know how big an impact this could have for students, why it's important, and how you can use their help in developing the school garden program. Besides knowing why school gardens are important, as we get into school gardening programming, there's a lot of other stuff you have to know too. Unfortunately, it's not just as easy as handing someone a sheet with, kids will do better if you do a school garden. There's some background that they need. And a lot of this is things that we can directly offer to them. Things like botany, some basic plant information, how plants grow, how to take care of seedlings, when these vegetables grow versus what season these vegetables grow in, things of that nature. A little bit about maintaining a garden, what happens each season, what kind of things do they need to look out for, pest issues, how often should they be watering, volunteer management. So here we're going to hit the nail on the head. You all are volunteers. As agents, we manage volunteers. That is not always something that schools are able to recruit for, able to manage, specifically when we were talking about a teacher, a classroom teacher. Is she ready for the volunteer management that this might require? We know that she's very busy or he's very busy. They're going to need help. So we need to open their eyes to who are you going to get to help you? When are they going to come? What kind of things are they going to do so that they're ready for that? And they're prepared and they know ahead of time that this is not a project that they're probably going to be able to do on their own. And that's okay. But we want to kind of guide them into what resources will you need to manage it. And then, of course, budget and fundraising. So again, there's not a lot of money just floating around in a lot of our school systems right now. So we've got to find ways to get money. Seeds cost money, soil costs money, lumber costs money, pots cost money. And again, we may be able to find some sponsors who will actually provide those supplies for free, or we may be able to find some groups that are willing to donate monies to help purchase some of these supplies. And of course, you may have opportunities within your Master Gardener unit to help with some of the funding for these projects as well. But again, opening the eyes of the people who are involved to how much the stuff costs. You know, we've had several teachers who wanted to apply for grants to get monies for this, but they have no idea even where to start as far as forming the budget to ask for the monies. So we want to be able to open their eyes to, yes, it will require some donations or monies or supplies, but these are some ways that we can do that. We can get those monies as well. So talking about educating them and getting them some of this information, especially from the botany, garden maintenance side of things, we got a lot of publications. We got a lot of paper out there, and it has some really great information. It truly does. I don't know how much most of you use the publications or how familiar you are with them, but we do have some great resources for folks. You can guide them to the publication page and let them wander and find some of the things. You can be very pointed in your recommendations for publications. You may actually even provide them to them, give them some printed copies of some that you think would be truly beneficial. But just a few to mention that are out there. There is one on planning a vegetable garden, which is a good publication that just gives some basics on kind of how do you start, which is a good introduction for a lot of our school gardens who are being led by someone who's not a gardener and never done this type of thing. It gives them some good footwork to get started with. There is also a vegetable planting guide, and this has been updated. This particular one has a chart in it, and Alex Hessler, who deals with providing and growing food supplies for dining services on campus at Virginia Tech, they have gone through this and actually taken the chart and set it up for each of the zones in Virginia. So if you have not checked out that publication yet, go to the pub's website, type in vegetable planting guide. It's great. It is a great resource, again, to hand to someone who's just starting and really needs to know, what can I plant? When do I plant it? When will the harvest be available to my students? And again, we'll talk a little bit more about this in a moment, but we have a lot of folks involved with school gardens who are very familiar with growing tomatoes and cucumbers and peppers, which are super. But typically, they do not ripen, are not ready for harvest until the students are gone for the summer. And then when they come back, things are starting to decline. So we really want to be able to give them some alternatives to those traditionally thought of garden crops. And this is a great way for them to see, what could I plant in the fall and harvest? What things could we plant early spring that the students could actually watch grow and be able to harvest? They can actually look at those time periods on that chart and pick out some different things that would work for them. So it really is a very nice resource. Again, very well laid out and easy to understand. Some of our gardens we know may not be very large gardens, depending on where our schools are. If they're urban schools, we may be more restricted to containers or vertical gardening, small space gardening. There are some good publications on container gardening. There is vegetable container gardening. That is a great publication. It actually includes information about what size pot you need for different vegetables. Again, just very well laid out and easy to understand. Getting away from vegetables, some of our schools may actually want to do something different like herbs. Different types of herbs. This may also allow them to do some perennials, which they don't have to replace each year as long as someone's maintaining them. But we have some good herb pubs out there with information about different herbs and also how they're used so they know what they can do with them when it's time to harvest. We have some good stuff on habitats if they're interested in inviting pollinators and wildlife into the garden for students to observe. We also, there's some great native books out there that you can find the PDF version of them, like on the Virginia Native Plant Society website, if they are interested in talking about native plants and growing things that may have been here some time ago. That's also a great hook for some of your history teachers, if you can hook in some more historic plants. But again, we have a lot of publications, and I could spend this entire time talking about the publications. If you have specific questions, please, let me know, and I can give you some more information on those. But what we oftentimes find is all teachers need is another stack of papers to sit on their desk. So sometimes providing publications is not always the most effective. It depends on the teacher, it depends on the situation. So sometimes what we find ourselves doing is actually providing consultations, going to the school or bringing the teachers, the administrators, the volunteers out to a site to look at another school garden, to look at a demonstration garden, to get a better understanding of what a school garden could look like, what they could do with it. I will say there could be issues with consultation, depending on how large of a school system you have. In Virginia Beach, we have 86 schools and 5,100 teachers. So opening up, hey, we'll do private consultations can open Pandora's box. So again, like the publications, there are pros and cons to doing consultation. It just depends on your particular situation. It can be great to give people a real feel for what they're getting ready to get into, but it can also bind up your volunteers in trying to help everyone out. Another option for getting your hands on these folks and educating them is by doing some kind of workshop or class where you could actually gather a group of them at one time and provide the information to all of them in a single sitting. So you could do workshops or classes. What we did in 2018, 19, 18, I believe it was, we did a school garden workshop in Virginia Beach. We put it out to all teachers in Virginia Beach, elementary, middle, and high school. We were able to gain support for the workshop through the public school system. So they actually granted the teachers professional development credit for attending. This is a huge hook for teachers. These teachers obviously wanted to learn about this and were interested in school gardening, but they were also getting credit because they came out on a Saturday. They spent their time on a Saturday out at our workshop. They did get professional development credit for it, and we offered them a day-long workshop with lecture, with breakout sessions, with tours, to give them a feel for school gardens. It doesn't have to be a day-long workshop. What we did this past fall was we actually did a half-day, completely hands-on workshop. And that one, there was no classroom time, there was no PowerPoint presentation, it was all hands-on. This is how you would, take a soil sample, plant seeds, all of that type of thing. So there's some different formats that you could use, but the nice thing about this particular style is that you can reach a larger audience at one time. So that is another opportunity for you as far as that goes. The other thing that I wanted to show you, see. Again, I'm talking about all of these different resources that are out there to you. So to give you a little bit more information, hold on one second. I have also put together, oops, bear with me, sorry about that. Okay. All right. I have also put together a curriculum site for all of this because I am giving you a lot of information right now, and I want people to have access to this, other cooperative extension agents and volunteers. I want to encourage people with school gardening. I mean, obviously we've seen the impacts that you can have with school gardening. So I developed this VCE School Garden Workshop curriculum website, and this is through Canvas, which is an online educational site that's used by Virginia Tech. You can access this. In order to access it, you have to be entered in as a student. So if you are interested in gaining access to this, I will provide my email at the end of the presentation. I invite you to send me an email with your name and email address, and I will add you so that you can go through the site. But I'm going to go through a few things with you today, just so you can get a feel for it and kind of see what's available to you. So, welcome to the School Garden site. When you come on here, there's a little introduction. My email address is included on that front page. There is a module section, and this is where the bulk of the material is included. So when we click on modules, I hope that is flipping for you all so you can see all of that. When you go to modules, I have broken this down into several sections, okay? So this is going to kind of take you step by step in how you can provide information and or training to teachers, administrators, volunteers, parents that you would like to have involved in a school garden project. So I'm going to start with the introductory section. In this section, I've included several different things. The first one is an agenda. So I talked about in Virginia Beach, we did a full day workshop. It was on a Saturday in June, just after school had ended. This is the workshop where the teachers were provided the professional development credit. And what I did is I included our agenda in here. Open that up just so you can get a look. Is that opening for you all? I don't know if you can see this or not. If you can't, it is simply an agenda with the times and the different subject matter that was covered in those particular sessions. So you can see all of that information. And it was broken down again. The morning was spent with some basic information, some time on some basic botany, some soil information. I also provided a flyer. So this is a flyer that I actually put together using a template from the State Master Gardener Office website. So it is a format that is open for you to use through your Master Gardener programs. But it's just a nice flyer that has the date and everything on there, a little information about the program. And I also had included a little bit of information about professional development credit. Again, great hook to get teachers involved. Program assistance. Doing any type of program like this it's not going to be a one-person project. You definitely need a team to do this. So for our full day workshop that we had, there were several jobs, and our Master Gardener team actually sent out a sign-up genius, just an online sign-up with different jobs and time slots for other Master Gardeners to sign up to help with this. So I just put together a sheet with job descriptions, different jobs that we felt were important to make that workshop a go. So for people to help out with that. And then the last one is the list of benefits that I talked about earlier in my PowerPoint for having a school garden. This is actually a document that I put together with the research, the documentation on why school gardens are beneficial. So this is actually like a paper that I've put together. You are welcome to use it. If there is a copy of it on here for you that you could use in helping to encourage people to get into school gardening programs. So that is our introduction section. Then the next few sections would actually be the sections in which I've provided materials for you to conduct a workshop, a training, a class for people who want to be involved in school garden workshops. Again, this could be done in person. It could also be done online if you wanted to provide them information and they would do it at their own pace, whatever way you see fit in using this in your program. So I'll start with the first module, which is just the planning. So this information was put together by our Master Gardener team. The first one is a presentation. So this is actually a PowerPoint that you see module 1 presentation. And you can see in the description there, that particular module talks a lot about the environmental conditions, general site analysis, your timeline, your budget considerations. So some basic things they want to consider before starting the garden, okay? Where are they going to put it? Where's the money going to come from? The Master Gardeners also did a great job of developing a planning sheet. And what they did is as the teachers or volunteers were in the workshop, after they would go over a section, they would actually have the teachers sit down and fill in the corresponding part of the planning sheet. So that as they're brainstorming, as they're getting ideas, they had a place to put these down in the appropriate area, whether it was budget or site analysis. And that way, when they left, they took that information with them. Because a lot of times we hear things and we have these great ideas, and then we leave and we go home, and mind you, this was a Saturday in June after school ended, and I'm sure their minds started to wander to much more tropical places after they left our workshop. So this allowed them to put that information down and be able to look back and say, okay, well, for budget, I thought these were really great ideas. For site analysis, I thought these areas at the school might be really good. So it's a nice little sheet that could be used for that. So that is our first module, kind of their introduction. This may also be a place, if you have people who are interested, you may present them some of this information with the benefits of school gardening. And this may be a point of weeding out. One of the things that I want to make sure that folks understand too is it is okay if someone who has, inquired about school garden says, you know what, I can't do this right now. That is okay. Because a lot of times what we see and the calls that we get are actually people who jumped into a school garden program and are now in over their heads and are very discouraged, and now they don't want to do it anymore, okay? It appears as a very daunting task. Giving people this information ahead of time helps them to see school gardens are super, and I wish every teacher could have access to one, but it is an additional task. Whether they are doing the physical part of the garden or not, there's management, there's working it into the curriculum. We don't want to discourage people from ever gardening again. So we want to be real. We want to give them the information ahead of time. We want to give them the resources. And if it takes them 2 or 3 years before they can get to a place where they can do it, but they can do it confidently, they know where to find the resources, they know who to ask the questions of, there's a better chance that this would be successful. They jump into it, they don't know what they're doing, they get very discouraged, and we lose them. as far as possibility of having that school garden. So feel free to open this up to people as kind of a weed out, to find the people who are ready to move forward and to find those who need to stew on this a little bit and figure out where they are and where they need to be to make it a success. All right, on to Module 2. This is Garden Basics. Again, I want you to have this information, maybe, there we go, to use, but please feel free to tweak this in any way, shape, or form, okay? Our Master Gardeners did a great job, Stacy McGraw, Lynn, Paula, in putting this together initially, and the PowerPoint they did a really great job on, and I've just broken it down into sections for you. So this is Module 2, and this is going to really get into the botany part of things. So it gets into soils, it gets into seed packets, how to read a seed packet, and so forth. So this gives them a lot of that botany background. And then I included a whole list of publications. So I told you there's some great stuff out there, and I went through and picked out some of the publications that fit with this particular module. So we've got things like annuals and perennials. What's the difference? How do you take care of them? Bulbs, soil samples, soil preparation, seed for the garden, just some of the basic botany stuff. I put that in here as well. So these are links to those publications. And if for any reason, I do try to go in here and update periodically. If for any reason they update any of the links and the link becomes broken before I can get in there, please note that next to each title, the publication number is listed so that you can just type in the publication number in the pub's website and pull it up that way. So that's Module 2. Module 3 is garden maintenance. Again, there's a little presentation there in there for you. This talks a little bit more about like pests and things that they'll have to do over the life of the garden. There is a publication in here. It is IPM because most of these teachers or folks working on these school gardens are most likely not going to want to use pesticides. They will probably want to use other modes of pest control, so this is an IPM worksheet. The Master Gardeners did a great job of coming up with this insect game, and this is something the teachers could actually do with the students. And it has pictures of different insects, and the students try to decide if it's a good bug or bad bug. So just a little tool that teachers could integrate into their curriculum, and then the kids could take it out into the garden and scout for those insects and so forth. So that's a really cute one if you want to use something like that as well. I'm going to move on to Module 4. This is managing the garden program. So again, there is a PowerPoint module in this one, and this is more about volunteers and resources. It includes information about our Master Gardeners, our VCE agent. We also have a research station here within the city. So it includes some of that information. And then I also included clinic information and lab information for troubleshooting garden issues. So those links are listed to their particular websites. Of course, remember, everyone except soil testing lab must come through the VCE office. So you're welcome to share that information as a resource or a benefit of working with us, but just keep in mind that they would have to come through the office, through your help desk, in order to submit those samples. On down to the last one is breakout sessions. So in our full day workshop, we actually broke out into these different sessions and gave them some specific information, let them kind of go where they felt like their garden might lead. So we had seed starting, garden design, native and pollinator gardens, veggie or edible gardens, and nutrition. And nutrition, we actually brought in one of our nutrition program assistants that works here in our office. She works specifically with youth and schools, and she was able to provide the teachers and volunteers information on how they could use those foods in nutritious recipes in the class, like smoothies and things like that. And so what I did for each of those breakout sessions is I included some of the publications related to those. I do want to point out that under garden design, the last two that are listed, Garden Themes for Kids and Theme Gardens, these are awesome websites hosted by North Carolina State University and I believe it's Georgia is the other one, that just list cool gardens that kids would like. So that's a great resource for teachers who don't necessarily want to do a vegetable garden, but want to have a catchy theme for their garden, like an alphabet garden, where the plants begin with different letters of the alphabet, or a zoo garden where plants are named after different animals, like zebra grass, and things like that. So those are really cute sites that I recommend even for you if you're developing demonstration gardens. They're pretty cool. All right, getting close to the end here. The next thing that I had was just evaluation. We did a short-term survey. So at the end of the workshop, we handed out a survey to the teachers and let them fill that out. It's great information. This is a pretty in-depth survey that we gave them, and it's really important to give it to them before they leave your site so that you can make sure you get it back. A majority of folks were extremely complimentary of the workshop. They gained a lot of information, but the big thing we got out of it was a lot of information, somewhat overwhelming for a lot of them, and that's why next go round, Master Gardeners decided to make it a half day, make it more hands-on, maybe more memorable. So evaluations are extremely important. Then we also did a long-term survey. So about 6 months out afterwards, once the school year had started, I sent out an online survey to the teachers who had participated in the workshop just to see what they had done. Had they developed a garden? Did they have other questions? The response was much lower, okay? Anytime you do this and send something out afterwards, it's hard to, pin people down to get the information back. But we did get a handful of them back. And out of the handful that we got, one of them had actually moved forward with a garden. Now, remember, the workshop was in June after school was out. This was in October. But at that point, only one person had moved forward as far as the garden went. But as far as I'm concerned, that's a victory. That's one garden we didn't have before. But keeping track of that, also sending them those surveys sometimes is the nudge they need to say, you know what, I do need to do something with that information. So, and then also there's an action plan that again was developed just to kind of help teachers get motivated to set goals. So it's something we would have given out at the end of the workshop with their survey, so that they could kind of think back on what they learned and kind of where they wanted to go from there. So 10:45 on the dot. All right. So that, again, is just something I've put together with some resources for you if you would like to start a school garden or start talking to people about a school garden, or, again, an after-school garden, a church garden for children, whatever the case may be. I am going to throw this back up here real quick. My email address, again, is here in red, ays@vt.edu. If you would like access to this, if you would simply send me an email, again, with your name, I will add you as a student to this class, we'll call it, so that you can have access to these resources. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Andrea. It looks like we did have one question kind of during your talk. Someone asked, is there a good publication for urban gardening for inner city schools? Are there any publications you would recommend for that?
I don't have any specifically for urban gardening that I've come across. However, some of those that, because I'm assuming in this urban, they don't have a large green space where they could do a garden. or it could be in an area where they have to have recess and might be in the way. I would suggest those container gardening and small space gardening. The Intensive Gardening Methods publication has several small space gardening solutions. It includes containers, vertical gardening, raised gardening beds. So that may give some alternative ideas for gardening. If I come up with any other resources, I will post them. I will just let you all know too that I've been cooperating with a couple of the other agents throughout the state, and I've got a few other resources. One of them includes a SOL correlation, which ding, 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 that gets a lot of attention from teachers too. If you can say, hey, this activity relates to this SOL, it's easier for them to work into their curriculum. So I'll be adding that to this site as well.
Great. If anybody else has other questions, feel free to type them into the chat box. Okay, there's a few that are coming up.
Okay.
Could you discuss how school garden programs are dealing with standards of learning and SOLs, and how those are putting pressure on time and content?
Yeah, so again, I totally understand. I actually came from public school education prior to being an agent. And I have kids in school. So I completely understand the pressures that are on teachers to cover these SOLs for testing. Test scores are extremely important in the eyes of administration. So that's one thing. I was really happy to get this SOL correlation so that, number one, teachers can say if they need to provide reason why they would want to do this. The hands-on correlation with the SOLs, getting kids to understand the concepts better by using that experiential learning versus just teaching them, you know, on the smart board and so forth. Now, time constraints, that is something different. And that's another reason I think the kids can be involved and you can minimize the activity to just what they need to get those key concepts for the SOLs. You're probably not in a school day going to be able to get the kids just to maintain the garden to maintain it. And that's why that volunteer support is so important, because the garden's going to need other stuff like weeding and watering and pest control and so forth that the kids may not have time to do. You may only have time to bang out those key concepts in the garden, but it's offering them such a great alternative to learning those concepts. But I don't really have a surefire way of fitting it in. They would have to be creative, and hopefully some of these resources that I'll be adding might be helpful to them in doing that.
All right. Do you have a Junior Master Gardener program?
We do have a Junior Master Gardener program. Ours is set up as a summer camp, day camp, and it is set up through our Department of Rehabilitation, through the Department of Parks and Rec, and it is a day camp for special needs students. Yep.
All right. How do you deal with schools not allowing vegetables grown in the garden to be eaten in the classroom?
So that is another issue, and we talked a little bit about pest control and how to handle that with things that may be touched and consumed by children. So if they cannot be consumed in the school, and I'll be honest with you, here, our kitchens in our schools no longer function in producing food, but rather warming and serving food. So some schools are not equipped to serve the food, so it can't be used by the students, and others just for food safety will not allow the foods to be consumed. So another great way to make it rewarding for the children, because they're going to want those fruits and vegetables that they've grown. So a way to keep that rewarding is to actually, if you have a food bank or a food pantry at a church that is willing to accept those donations, allowing the students to donate it to a charitable organization is another great way to use the foods and to make the kids really feel good about it, and to, again, give them that kind of bigger picture realization of how important these food supplies are.
Great. And then there's two questions, both about maintenance. So the first is, how do you approach maintaining gardens in the summer? And the next is, do you have suggestions for keeping school gardens watered beyond volunteers, whether that's watering systems, timers, etc.?
Yeah, so maintenance is probably the biggest thing, especially during the summer where everybody leaves. So a couple of things with garden maintenance during the summer. Options are, number one, you don't do a spring to summer garden. You do that fall garden, you do that early spring garden, and then you let the garden lie during the summer. Of course, barren garden area during the summer is typically going to become a complete weed fest while everybody's gone. So one of the suggestions that I've heard that I think is awesome is actually planting a cover crop. One that you can plant and just kind of leave. When you come back, the kids can learn about cover crops and turning them over into the garden. So that's a great way to do it, is to not do a garden, but rather just plant a cover crop and let that happen. The other opportunity there, and this could help with weeding, with watering, all of that. Something that I felt like might be a good idea, and I've heard of some interest in doing this, is if there is a nearby church or house of faith that does have a food pantry, some of them may be interested in actually taking over the garden for the summer, because a lot of the food production would be during that time. They would maintain the garden, but they would also take the supplies of food and put them in their food pantry. Then when the kids come back, the garden's still in good shape. Depending on where you are in the state, here, there would still probably be some production into the beginning of the fall, into the beginning of the school year from the garden they did last year. So that could be a rewarding experience for the students to see what happened while they were gone, kind of thing. But I think that's another option for summer maintenance. As far as watering goes, yeah, if you can find an irrigation company who is willing to set up a small system for the garden as a donation to the school, check out those parents and what connections they have. That is awesome. If you can get someone who is willing to do that, who is willing to actually install kind of a rudimentary irrigation system. It doesn't have to be fancy, although they do have some nice ones out there that have controls for your phone. So that's really a great option. But there's plenty of timers out there that can be hooked to hoses. You could put soaker hoses in areas, have timers on them. Again, it may require someone checking in periodically to make sure batteries haven't died, hoses haven't come unhooked, things of that nature. And sometimes the teacher is willing to do that as long as she doesn't have to come out every day. Sometimes custodial staff may be willing to just check up on it. Or sometimes, again, depending on the landscape services that your school receives through your municipality, you may be able to find someone on that team who is willing, when they come cut the grass, to check and make sure that everything is still operating properly. And on that note, I just want to throw into, make sure that landscape services is involved when all of this goes down. We have a lot of teachers who try to put up gardens and then they can't cut the grass, or they can't get their equipment into the space that now is around the garden. So make sure you key them into this, and they can be a huge partner in this. Our landscape services actually offered that if they could place the beds, they would provide the beds for the schools. So great partnership. They get what they need, and then you get free beds. So.
Great. Do you promote organic methods in your gardens?
We don't really go super in depth on organics per se. We will discuss non-chemical methods only because most of the teachers do not necessarily want to be involved with having to get out there and spray chemicals of any kind, organic or non-organic. So we do try to give them alternatives. I try to recommend other ways to manage pest issues besides chemical methods. So the things like the good bug, bad bug, and maybe promoting predator-prey relationships. There are insectaries online where the teachers could actually, if they had a pest issue, they could purchase predators and then release them in the garden and let the students kind of see how those predator-prey relationships work. That's actually included in some SOLs as well, I think. So I think that's probably the bulk of the pest methods, pest control methods, is just encouraging them to use non-chemical methods. And the other thing is you don't know what students you're going to get and what they may have reactions to and so forth. So.
Great. Next question is, what are some of your favorite farm to school books or books on school gardens?
Okay, so this is one I am not prepared for. I do have some books on school gardening that I actually did some research with and kind of putting all of this together. And actually that is something that I need to add to this site as well. I'll add a list of some of those resources as well for you because I do not have them in front of me. I am extremely sorry about that. But I will add them to this, or if you want to send me an email privately, I can send you a list as well of a few of the books that I did some research in that had some good information in them.
Great. And here's a couple comments from folks about how they maintain during the summer with their garden. So it looks like some people ask families to adopt the garden for a week during the summer, and then families can take care of the garden and harvest things. Another school has a summer camp, and some of the students help maintain the garden during that. And again, parents sign up to water for 1 week increments in the summer. And then the group gathers, tries and gets together and weed once a week and use lots of mulch to put up weeds. So it looks like there are some strategies folks use during the summer to help maintain those gardens.
Yeah, those are awesome. Those are awesome. I'll tell you, one of our most successful gardens, the teacher actually has a club. And it is specifically, it's an Achievable Dream Academy. So they specifically work with students who come from lower economic areas and so forth. And so she has a boys club, and that is like their big project, but it affords her after school and alternative time scheduling with them that offers a little bit more as far as maintaining the garden and more tending to it. So, but those were great ideas. I love the families adopt a garden during the summer. That's pretty cool.
All right, I think we have time for one more question. So someone asked, do you plan to offer garden clubs to 10 to 13-year-old children after school or on weekends? So for a little bit of the older age kids.
Yeah, so a lot of times these gardens that we're seeing are in elementary schools, okay? So a lot of K through 5 are being targeted with this, and middle school and high school are not. I think this is an awesome opportunity for middle and high school. I'm a former high school teacher, so that kind of pulls at my heartstrings as far as reaching to that group. And there is a little bit more availability of clubs developing with those age groups. They encourage those civic clubs and so forth. A lot of schools are actually here, they require community service, especially for high school students, like documented community service. So I think this could be great opportunities for those middle and high schoolers for after-school clubs, environmental clubs, yes, community service hours for them to work in the garden. I mean, that doesn't even have to be a club. It could rather be like a student sign up where kids come at different times and work in the garden and so forth. So I think it's a great opportunity. There are still science classes that cover a lot of plant life botany information that this could be incorporated to in those older grades. But also don't forget that this could be incorporated into a lot of things, including culinary classes, history classes, and so forth. So we have not done that yet, but it is definitely something that I would like to move further with and see what we can do, because I actually think there's probably more opportunity for extracurricular activity with these in those older grades.
Great. Thank you so much, Andrea. I think that concludes our school garden webinar for today. This webinar has been recorded and will be available at our website, mastergardener.ext.vt.edu, sometime in the coming week. So please look forward to that. And then again, Andrea says you're welcome to email her to get access to the curriculum or to ask any other questions about school gardens you might have. So thanks everyone for joining us, and thanks Andrea for presenting.
Thank you.